Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn finally faced off on the Piers Morgan show. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to the interview, what I saw as being the key highlights and moments, whilst dissecting the psychology of both men and how I think it might influence their fight. This is the first time we've seen them together since that infamous egg slap, and I noticed some really interesting psychological details watching this interview. I also have a few things to say about the way Piers Morgan conducted himself. And I think this might be the closest I've seen Eubank Jr. to being rattled in a confrontation before a fight in an interview. So stick around to the end of this one as I try and unveil all the secrets and things you missed from Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn on Piers Morgan. Hello everyone, and welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, we've got more content for you on this one. It's starting to hot up now a little bit. The egg slap happened. We didn't get the proper face-off on the zone because I guess they wanted to keep them apart. They wanted to let Conor Benn cool down, or maybe it was just a narrative building exercise. But we had Conor Benn in a solo face-off, which I didn't bother reacting to because honestly, I thought it was an utterly pointless exercise. I think you need your opponent in front of you to really be able to gauge whether or not the person is rattled, to gauge whether or not they're trying to do interesting things and different things. So I didn't bother reacting to that, but I will react to this because this is great content. This was a damn good interview, very entertaining, very interesting. And I noticed a lot of really, there was a lot of big things and obvious things, but there was also some small nuanced details that I'm going to pick out for you in this one. I've started my day the right way, guys. I had a black coffee. I had a couple slices of pizza left over from last night. Vegan cheese, of course, because I can't do lactose. But I've started the day the right way. And now I'm super excited to get into this one for you. So before I do, please bang a like on the video. Please subscribe to A Guy Called Henry and hit that notification bell. And get your comments in the comments section below. Right now, who do you think wins this fight? Eubank Jr. or Conor Benn? And I'm going to have more questions for you as we go because a lot of this stuff is interpretive. A lot of this stuff is a matter of opinion. This video is going to be pretty long because there's so much to get through, guys. But I promise you, I'm not going to talk about anything that's not worth talking about. I'm going to be sure to keep it on topic and be as concise as I can and make my points because this is a long interview and there was loads of good stuff. So I recommend sticking with me to the end because I guarantee you there's going to be lots and lots of gems along the journey. So without further ado, let's get straight into this reaction of Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn on Piers Morgan.
Ben, well, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I've been watching the press conferences that happened, and there's real hatred here. I've interviewed a lot of boxers. I've rarely detected such a palpable loathing that people have for each other as you two do. That's why we've got two security guys here. Wouldn't normally have that for an interview, but we were advised by your teams that we should do that in case you start hitting each other.
I guess the first place to start here is to address this opening question from Piers Morgan about this genuine hatred between them, the requirement for bodyguards and whatnot. I think the reality is that whether or not there's genuine hatred between them, it's probably fair enough having those bodyguards because manufactured hatred can actually quite quickly turn into something more authentic and more real. And I was literally in my living room this morning watching this interview, and my housemate said to me, do you think they actually hate each other? He's not into boxing. And I was like, do you think they actually hate each other? And I said, I think it's convenient for them to hate each other because it generates money. I don't think before this fight was made, there was any hatred. But I think since the failed tests, the way that will have meddled with Eubank Jr.'s schedule, the potential to, be hurt by somebody who has cheated in a drugs test is a very real thing in the boxing ring. So that is going to change the way you feel about them. And I do think at the beginning it felt like a bit of a manufactured fight. And even now, it does feel manufactured because, as I said before, it doesn't really do anything for them in terms of getting closer to winning world titles and having big sporting achievements in terms of the governing bodies. But it does make a shed ton of money, we'll say. A lot of cash. And so I think it's convenient for them to hate each other. Whether the hatred is actually real and genuine, I don't know. But I don't know if it's even... I don't know. I just don't really believe they hate each other. Eubank might dislike him. Benn might dislike Eubank, but I don't think they genuinely hate each other. And as far as the bodyguards, security guards go, I'd say it's probably not a bad shout because things could kick off.
With people like Michael Watson, who ended up in a wheelchair. I was ringside when Nigel Benn fought Gerald McLennan, who ended up in a wheelchair. This is a brutal sport. People have died in the ring. People have been left paralyzed by fighting. When you have a hatred that's as real as this, does that play on your mind?
I don't hate this man. I would never give him that type of power over me. I hate what he stands for. I hate what he did. I hate what he represents. But as him as a person, I'm not going to say I hate him. I'm not giving him that power over me. I don't hate anybody. I've just got to make sure that we set an example here. You know, what he did in failing these 2 drugs tests, in my opinion, is unacceptable. As you said, people have been paralyzed, people have died. So for anybody who is out there thinking to cheat, they have to be made an example of. They have to be punished, they have to be embarrassed. And that's what I've been doing.
Eubank Jr. immediately removing the emotion from Piers Morgan's question, removing the emotive element of hatred and the concerns around potential safety because of what they want to do to each other, and immediately directing it into his own agenda. I'm going to emphasize this, that I am making an example here with my actions of a drug cheat. And this guy is a drug cheat, and I hate what he stands for. I hate what he did. I hate what he represents. It's very, very clever from Eubank. And I noticed he did this in the last press conference. It's going to be even more fascinating watching Eubank's agenda, the way that Eubank conducts himself in this situation, which is more of a one-on-one interview, where it's more focused on Conor Benn. And indeed, Piers Morgan, you'll see he plays a fairly large role in this. He's not just an interviewer that facilitates. He's an interviewer that sort of instigates and, I would say, involves his own personal feelings, I would say. And you'll see what I mean by that as the interview runs. But Eubank Jr. instantly removing the emotional component, making it very crystal clear that this is not a hatred thing. This is about putting a drug cheat in line. And the reason he keeps raising this drug cheat thing, I believe, because it doesn't really help to sell the fight as a contest, but what it does do is it increases the pressure on Conor Benn. You are a drug cheat. You have done these things. That's the way that I view it. That's what I think Eubank Jr. is doing. He's increasing the pressure on Conor Benn. He's making it a harder fight for Conor Benn to win by making Benn into the bad guy when he maybe doesn't want to be. And we talked about this with the press conference. He is consistently emphasizing that drug cheating element, and you will see that throughout this interview.
I guess in the end, only he knows for sure. But the reality is that all the investigatory bodies have cleared him to fight in this fight with you. So you might think he's a cheat, and you're perfectly entitled to your view. But the reality is, if he was a convicted cheat, he wouldn't be able to fight you. So do you accept that for the purposes of your fight, that he's not a convicted cheat? He's someone that you might think he is, but he's not been convicted of that.
Whether he's been convicted or not is irrelevant. The fact is, substances were found in his system. You know, there have been thousands of fighters that have been popped for performance-enhancing drugs.
And been banned.
And been banned.
And been banned.
Or been fined.
Every single one. I've not received a fine. I've been cleared by 3 organisations, by the NADP, the WBC, UCAD, no ban, cleared to fight, no fine.
In boxing today that have failed drugs tests, they've been fined or served bans, and then they've been let back into the ring. This is in no way different. He got caught. He went out of boxing for a little bit, spent $1 million trying to clear his name.
You know what? That's why you're an idiot.
No,
because I've been cleared by 3 organisations, by people who are a lot smarter than you.
Was there drugs in your system?
This is you talking personal.
Was there drugs in your system?
Maybe not. None of your business. I've been cleared 3 times.
It is my
business
when you were preparing to fight me.
Yeah, I have to pause it there. I mean, just firstly, let's talk about this whole line of questioning from Piers Morgan. I find it astonishing. I really find it astonishing that the emphasis here is on Eubank Jr. to clarify whether or not he's okay. And it's more than clarify. He is being pressured to accept the reality that Conor Benn has been cleared. And it's sort of like they're encouraging him. Piers Morgan here is encouraging Eubank Jr. to change his mindset to he's been cleared, therefore he's okay to fight. Piers Morgan here is showing an extreme lack of understanding of the way that boxing works. There are many, many people, as Eubank Jr. has just pointed out, in boxing that have failed drugs tests and get back in the ring again. Whether or not they've officially served a ban is a completely different situation. Conor Benn can say he's been cleared by these 3 organizations all he wants. The reality is, we never got a reason. It was never explained to us how and why he failed those tests. So that is the fundamental issue with Conor Benn. And the reality is this flexing he's doing of, we spent $1 million, so I must be innocent. Mate, you spending $1 million makes me think you're less innocent, because by spending that £1 million, you just hold up proceedings and make things even more difficult and even more murky, even harder for the governing bodies to move through and do their thing and do their due diligence and check on what's going on. In my opinion, to my perception of how these proceedings work, the more money you have, the more difficult. I mean, look at Man City with the Premier League. The more money you have, the more litigious you make things, the harder it is for the governing bodies to actually enforce their rules. Conor Benn was out the ring for quite a period of time, never had an official ban, but potentially you could take that as a backdated ban that was never announced. That is a possibility. And then Ben here has the audacity to tell Eubank, when he says, why did you fail the test? He goes, it's none of your business. Absolutely insane. It's all of our business. We should all want to know why Conor Benn failed that test if we're a fan of boxing, if we want to support Conor Benn and get behind him in his career. And it goes back to that comment that was made about him, that sort of that silver spoon sort of arrogant attitude that with which he approached the entire failed test in the first place. Rather than letting things play out and keeping quiet, he was attacking everybody. He was being very aggressive, and he was being sort of so hard done by, acting as if the normal rules didn't apply to him. And that is what irritated people. And then to say to Eubank Jr., it's none of your business. This guy's going to fight you. It's only his business. It's more his business than anybody else's. So that whole moment there is ridiculous to me. The fact that Piers Morgan is already turning up the heat on Eubank Jr. to try and accept that Conor Benn has been cleared is mental to me, because you should be putting the pressure on Conor Benn to explain how and why he was cleared, rather than Eubank Jr. to accept it, especially when, as I say, we had no information. So I find that whole sequence just utterly ridiculous, quite frankly. Get in the comments below. Let me know. Do you agree with me? Is it ridiculous, or am I just being a closet Eubank fan? I don't think so. I think that's crazy. Anyway, we continue.
You don't know the ins and outs. You think you know.
Well,
me trying to explain it to you.
Hang on, let me ask you, Conor, on that point, because you raised it at one of the press conferences, and it's a valid point. Do you accept that these substances were found in your body?
There's nothing to accept.
No.
It's the facts.
No?
No.
It's the facts.
Because
I never took anything knowingly. I never took.
But that's a different question.
Yeah.
Whether you took it knowingly or not, do you accept that they were found?
I struggle to accept it still.
Because you don't want to accept it.
I struggle to accept it.
Let's say that he
hang on,
was an accident.
Hang on, quick, Chris.
No, I need to say this. Let's say it was an accident.
No, but
Let's give him the benefit of the.
I'll just respond to that very quickly. So Piers Morgan's balanced that out a bit there and said to Conor Benn, do you accept that these substances were found in your body? And Ben says he struggles to accept it, and his explanation is he doesn't know how it got there quite clearly. And that's why he struggles to accept it, because he would never have cheated, etc., etc. Yeah, we'll never really know. That's the reality of the situation. And then you see Eubank Jr. here trying to tussle with Piers Morgan. I'm going to skip that because it's not interesting to listen to. But Eubank isn't able to assert himself on this one quite the same way that he was with the press conference, in my opinion.
Fighters can fail drugs tests and appear back in the ring. It's happened 1 million times before, and it will happen 1 million times again. This is what's happened with Conor. Whether he is innocent of not knowing that how the drugs got in his system, you're still guilty.
Do you accept that can happen?
Because
do you accept that can
as a fighter, it is your job to know everything you are eating, drinking, putting into your system. If you don't monitor it and somebody slips something in somewhere, which I do not believe, but if that's what he's trying to say happened, it's still your fault, you're still guilty, you're still a drugs cheat, and we still have to make an example of it.
Conor, you've said to me before, it's been your position, I think, that you believe it may have come from contaminated eggs. Is that still your position about it? Is that what you think is the...
The case is done. I'm not here to talk about the case at all. It's,
I'm only asking because he hit you with an egg, obviously.
He can do what he wants. He's an idiot. And he's an idiot that's going to get chinned come April 26. Period.
So there's a couple of things there. The first thing is Eubank Jr. with that hardline response, which is essentially what we describe as strict liability, which is you are entirely responsible for whether or not you failed a drugs test, whether you took drugs deliberately or not. It's your responsibility to make sure all the things that go into your body, the supplements, the foods, whatever else, is free of contaminants, free of potential traces of performance enhancers, which is the brutal reality of being an athlete. When you are a higher end boxer, it's a lot easier because you have a lot more money. So you have the means and ways of doing that, basically. The second part of this is Piers asking Ben about the egg excuse, which is an interesting one because I heard Adam Casserole talking about this recently, who is the guy who does the Fight Disciples, and he is on TalkSport a fair amount. And he had a whole thing where he was talking about this, and he was saying that supposedly, this is what he said, because I didn't realize this, the egg excuse never actually came from Conor Benn. And I believe it may be the WBC. It was one of the bodies that was investigating Ben, essentially suggested to Ben that that would be the reason why he failed the test. They essentially presented him with an excuse for why he failed the test. And Ben apparently has never used the egg excuse. This is what Adam Casserole was saying. I don't know what's true and what's not true there. But if that is the case, it's obviously unacceptable that a governing body would provide you with a reason. And look, what this all comes down to is this. The strict liability thing is relevant and valid when we don't have any kind of reasoning. I mean, I go with Eubank's line of mindset there when there's just been nothing provided. So it's like, I'm not going to give this to you. And also, let's be honest, the strict liability thing might be harsh, but it also assists Eubank's cause in these press conferences, in these interviews. I do not care what happened. In my head, you are a drug cheat. To the public, you are a drug cheat. There is no caveat. There's no get off here. There is absolutely no way you can get out of being what you are, which is a drug cheat. So I think it's smart tactics from Eubank. I think it's clever. It's clever psychologically, I'll say that. It just puts all the pressure back on Ben. There is no way you can get out of saying this. There is no way you can get out of the fact that you are now labeled a drugs cheat. You are now labeled the bad guy. And then Eubank's like, let's just set that in motion and see how he handles with the pressure.
You have a very good relationship with your father.
Unbelievable relationship.
Has it always been good?
He's my hero.
He's your hero?
He's my hero.
And he's been there throughout this process at your side?
He's probably struggled with it more than myself.
Why?
I'm his son. I'm his son.
Does he really want you to do this fight?
Of course. 100 million %. 100 million %. And I wish my dad done more than grab you by the throat the other day.
His father's upset more than him because he's destroyed his father's legacy.
I'm not there. Mate, you don't even get on with your dad. Talk about destroy your father's legacy.
Against the Ben's
Talk
name.
about destroy your father's legacy.
That is, that's actually what's
Let me
happening.
ask you, Chris, because they have a very good relationship, Conor and his dad. You do not currently have a relationship at all, as far as I'm aware, with your father. What's going on there?
I'll just quickly comment on that. Eubank Jr. very quickly there saying that I don't care about the relationship with your father. This is about name and about legacy. And by doing what you've done with the drug cheating, you have dragged the Ben name through the mud. And this obviously instantly riled up Conor Benn. And he's saying, ruining my family name, look at yourself sort of thing. It's been a constant, it's maybe been the only barb that Conor Benn's actually been able to throw at Eubank Jr., that and the Liam Smith knockout, is that him and his father don't have a very good relationship right now. And I actually think that's incredibly classless. It's difficult for him because he is in a weak position. He hasn't got much to say to Eubank Jr. because Eubank Jr. hasn't done the things that, he hasn't failed a drug test is what I'm trying to say. So Eubank Jr. has that ammunition. You can't really fight fire with fire here. And what you've done by trying to is actually go somewhere quite deep and quite personal. And I think I commented after the press conference that Eubank Jr. didn't seem particularly affected by those comments, but actually you'll see in a minute in this one, I do actually think that Eubank felt those a bit more. And I believe that Eubank doesn't want to get drawn into an emotional conversation. And so Conor Benn to go there is in a way smart, but also I do think it kind of crosses a line.
I think people will be curious how long you've been estranged from your dad.
I mean, I've said it twice now. I don't know what more you want.
Well, you
to
said
tell
years, but that could be 2 years or 10 years.
A couple of years.
A couple of years, okay. And what effect has that had on you?
I have upheld the family name. I've never cut corners. I've done my job. I've dedicated my life to this sport. The Eubank name is still at the top. It's still relevant. It's still respected. The worst thing Conor's done is put question marks.
Well, let's come to that.
On
I'm going to come
Ben's
to.
name. Let me talk.
Okay.
He's put question marks against the Ben name because, as they say, like father, like son. So if he's capable of cheating, did his father cheat?
I've shown more integrity and resilience.
That's the question that now arises.
You have done your whole career.
That's now the question that arises.
Then you have done your whole career. You're
Like
choosing
father,
to
like
fight a welterweight.
I don't believe his father didn't know what he was doing. I just don't believe.
As I say, cleared 3
So
times
that
by
means
people who
that
are a lot smarter
Nigel
than you.
Benn.
Very, very interesting from Eubank there. He's asked a question which is potentially quite, emotionally triggering. He's asked, how does it affect you? By Piers Morgan asked him, how does it affect you that you and your dad don't really talk? And Eubank pauses, and then he immediately spins it back into his objective for this, which is to put the pressure on Conor Benn. And he goes, he doesn't answer that question. He goes, what I've done is I've upheld the family name. And he does this quite masterfully because he does it in such a controlled and measured and calm and paced way, slow-paced way. You don't quite know where he's going, and it gives him the opportunity to redirect the conversation. And he basically says, I've upheld the Eubank name. This guy can't say the same thing. And he's basically saying, don't worry about my relationship with my dad. Don't worry about my personal life. Just know that whatever our names are, I've kept mine clean and he hasn't because he's failed this test. And again, taking it back to that test. And then he even goes as far as to say, and he's kind of like one-upped himself. He's leveled it up a bit here from the first press conference. I think he's probably, thought about this and thought, how can I make this even more severe? Or maybe he's thought of it in the moment, but he's then gone, how do we not know his dad didn't cheat? Like father, like son, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, all that good stuff. How do we know his dad didn't cheat if he's cheated? Maybe that's what the Benn name is all about. And again, he triggers Conor Benn instantly. Very, very clever from Eubank, in my opinion.
Billions of people that are going through things 10 times worse. So I have no right to sit here and complain and feel sorry for myself. And it's just not
If he's
me.
watching this, what would you say to him?
I'm here. I'm getting ready for the biggest fight of my life. If you want to be next to me, like his father's next to him, we can do it together. If not, no hard feelings. I'll get the job done for you. Don't worry about it.
Do you love him, your dad?
He's my old man. It doesn't matter if I don't talk to him until the day I die. I'm always going to love him. He taught me everything.
He's indicated this fight means a lot to him. You need to win.
When did he indicate that?
This is what we've been told.
I haven't, like I said, I haven't heard from him. I haven't heard any indications from him. As far as I know, he doesn't want this fight to go ahead.
Yeah, so Eubank clearly, it's an interesting one. I feel like he's trying to remain as reserved as possible while addressing that question. And he does seem to be sad about his dad not being part of the team. But I also think he's trying to reduce it in importance by, bringing up how much worse things are going on in the world and whatnot. And that's how he's chosen to deal with this topic. And I suppose that coming into this fight, he must have known this was going to be a question that was asked frequently. Absolutely, he would have known. And then Piers sort of saying there, we've heard from so he claims he's got some sort of inside source because Eubank says he hasn't spoken to his dad, that his father feels like Chris needs to win the fight. But Chris said, as far as I know, he doesn't even want the fight to happen. So it's hard to know what's going on there. But I would say for sure that you do sense a bit of a sadness in Eubank Jr. that his dad isn't a part of it. I do detect that. And yeah, it's interesting. Conor Benn has said a couple things about his dad, but he's not really going for Eubank in these moments. And to be honest with you, I feel like he's only doing it, as I said before, as a retort to the drug cheating thing. I don't think he really wants to do that. I don't even necessarily think Conor Benn's a bad guy, but I do think he needs to try and keep up with Eubank Jr. in these press conferences. I mean, the only other answer would be to completely disengage, which he doesn't want to do and hasn't done. So it's a difficult one. But yeah, this is definitely a tricky subject, and Piers Morgan's trying to go there because he wants the sound bites and whatnot, and Eubank is trying to negotiate it in the most neutral way possible and trying to keep the emotion out of what is, essentially it's a build up to a fight. You want to have fire, you want to have conflict. You don't want to be talking about your difficult relationship with your father in that moment.
This is the blessings of our dads. They laid the foundation for us. So it's sad to see that the relationship ain't working on their end, genuinely, and I mean that. It's sad to see. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that being funny, because the relationship I have with my dad, it would be great to see you and your dad in your corner. I mean that.
Hard to believe.
Well,
I've got to be careful. I don't want you drawing me into something.
No, listen, I'm just saying.
He's being sincere.
No, because you haven't heard the things he said leading up to this interview.
About you. Yeah, about you. Of course, I think you're an idiot.
About our relationship, my father's
your
relationship.
dad don't like you. Yes, I agree. Your dad don't like you. It's a matter of, that's a fact.
Him talking about him,
it's a fact.
I take everything he's saying with a grain of salt. I can't help it.
Okay, well, it's a matter of fact your dad don't like you. Why is he?
That's the first time I've seen Ben do something. I don't know if he's doing it deliberately or if he's accidentally contradicting himself, but quite calculated and quite manipulative, in my opinion, to sort of say, oh, I'm so sorry for you that you and dad don't have a good relationship. I wish you had a relationship like me and my dad. And Eubank just sat there looking at him quite solemnly, being like, mate, I don't believe anything that comes out of your mouth. I think you're trying to emotionally manipulate me a little bit here. And Ben's like, no, it's sincere. I really mean this, and all that. But then he goes, and then he very quickly goes, yeah, but your dad doesn't like you, does he? And it's sort of like, that's where the contradiction lies. So I think that's Ben trying to use what he's got, as I said before, to try and manipulate Eubank Jr. to make him feel emotional and upset. I mean, it is definitely a massive narrative in this fight, and it must be hard for Eubank not having seen you there. In a sense, it does really emphasize and highlight the fact there is a split between them going into this fight. So It's an interesting one. I don't know how calculated Conor Benn's being, but there's definitely a little bit of a contradiction in the sudden nice guy there. I don't buy it. I personally don't buy it. Do you buy it? I don't know. Get in the comment section below. Let me know. Do you think Conor Benn's actually being genuine there, like wishing well between Eubank and his dad, or do you think he's just trying to make Eubank feel sort of emotional and more reserved and less fiery and less animosity towards Conor Benn? Because that's kind of what you want. You don't want your opponent to dislike you because well, maybe you do, but I don't think you want your opponent to be focused on you. You want to make them feel emotional and create difficult feelings with them, because then it's harder to fight.
It's the name of the game. We know what we're in for. We know what we've signed up for. Our life's always on the line. That's our choice. You know, ultimately we prepare extremely hard. We're elite athletes. We do the best we can. But the end goal is to never ruin someone's life. Our goal is to go in there and beat the other man.
Do you feel the same way, Chris? If you're honest?
Honestly, I'm shocked he's speaking like this. It doesn't match the energy that I've been seeing over the last few days. And, you know, I don't like it. You know, it's true. What he's saying is true. But, you know, this is not as a fighter supposed to be the mentality going into a fight.
What's your mentality?
My mentality is search and destroy, you know. I've been in fights where I have hospitalized people. Nick Blackwell, you know, he died on the way to hospital when we fought. He was revived with an adrenaline shot to his heart. Now he doesn't walk, or he doesn't speak well, and you know, he's been severely affected by the fight that we had. Going through something like that, it makes it real, and it turned me cold, because I knew that this is possible. This isn't a movie, this isn't a video game. This happened, and it could happen again. It could happen to me if I don't dedicate myself. So I'm extremely passionate when it comes to that. So you can understand my disgust and my obsession with the fact that Conor got popped, because, you know, performance-enhancing drugs increase the chances of tragedies like this happening, which is why I can never forgive him. Can never forgive him.
So when you get in that ring,
that's, again, masterful from Eubank, manipulating the conversation back into what his agenda is, which is highlight that this is the bad guy, this man is a drug cheat, this man is a cheat. Initially, he was asked there, you know, do you agree with Conor Benn? And Conor sort of saying, you know, I want to go in there and beat him up, but I don't want to kill the guy. And I'm sure Eubank would say the same thing. And Eubank's sort of like, oh, I'm surprised by that answer. And then he masterfully sort of steers it around, you know, the fact that he's been involved in these tragedies before. He knows the dangers of boxing firsthand, having inflicted it on other people. And that's why he prepares the best he can to keep himself safe. And yet here is a man who has said all these things, but clearly has no regard for that because of these failed tests. And this is what Eubank Jr. is saying. Very clever, very, very clever. And again, not really answering Piers' question, but again, manipulating the conversation in the way that he wants. Because the initial question was about, you know, are you worried that something bad could happen because of the animosity towards one another? And Eubank's like, I'm not worried about the animosity. I'm worried about the fact that this guy tried to cheat. So very clever. And he's just got endless opportunity to take control of these moments because of the failed test. It's such an ironclad fact that it's not really up for debate. Like, he failed the test, so Eubank can always use that. It's not a matter of opinion. The fact is that he did it, and so Eubank will always have that to fall back on, and that is exactly what he's doing. He is taking advantage of it.
Why do you think that, and what direction do you think I'm taking it?
You know exactly what you're doing, Piers. You're very good at what you do, but I'm not falling into the trap.
What do you think the trap is? Genuinely curious.
I don't want this to be, you know, you're not getting any emotions out of me.
You think you're being smart, but you're not. You're just being an idiot.
I'm not being smart.
You think you're being smart.
Piers is being smart.
No,
you're being dumb.
Smart.
He got you.
I'm still going to flatten you.
He got you.
Do I want you to get back up, Chris?
He got you.
Do I want you to amend your relationship with your dad?
Piers is not getting me.
Most of the public do. Is your dad in my corner come fight night? Yes, he is. But yes, I would love to see you guys mend your relationship. Okay. It is sad to see, and life is too short.
I don't want to hear about
life is too short.
Well,
it's going to be sad when your ass
is going to get in that
when your ass is handed to you come April 26th.
And we're going to hurt each other.
Hopefully that'll mend your relationship.
We're going to hurt each other in front of millions of people. That is the bottom line.
I mean, Conor, for me...
Very, very interesting from Conor Benn there. He said, "Do I want you to mend your relationship with your dad?" He goes, "Most of the public do." Now, that is an interesting statement to me because I can speculate on why Conor Benn would say something. Earlier, I was saying I don't know how genuine he's being. I don't know if he really cares, or if this is a way for him to be like, "Oh, I really hope you guys get better. Look at me and my dad." So there's the element of that, but also he said most of the public do. I think then in that case that he sort of revealed his hand a little bit there, in my opinion, and he's basically only saying that because he wants to get back in public favor. If you have a general awareness of what the public want and you cite that as your reason for saying something, in my opinion, all you're doing that for, when you're in a heated situation like this, all you're doing it for is to try and get a little bit of the public on your side for being a nice person or whatever. And I think that he's basically taken that as a moment, as an opportunity to be like, look, no, I actually am a nice guy. I really hope this guy mends his relationship with his dad. And so I think that's where the contradiction is. It's that he wants to be able to say that, but then at the same time, he wants to say, "I'm going to smash your head in," and your dad hates you. So he's kind of caught between two strategies. He wants to be liked, but he also wants to be this ferocious guy and try and intimidate Eubank a little bit, or at least fight fire with fire. So he's caught between these two sort of personas, in my opinion. And I think that comment sort of revealed that. And now this whole exchange here is about Eubank not wanting Piers Morgan to take control of the narrative here and not make it an emotional thing about how fighters can get so damaged in the ring. Not bring it up right now. Not talk about his relationship with his dad. This is about him versus Ben, and he wants the animosity, he wants the fire, and he wants to steer the narrative, which is, I am going to go and beat up and make an example of this drug cheat. I don't want to talk about any of this other stuff. So it's very interesting from Eubank, and yeah, I find the whole thing it's such a delicate balance. Anyway, let's continue.
Just been flattened by a light middleweight. You think I'm in the slightest concerned? I will absolutely iron you out. I am going to come in there and stick it on you from the get-go.
Good.
Straight away. I'm going to come out there hot skipping a big right hand to a big flipping head of yours.
I don't believe you.
You don't believe me?
No.
What would you believe then?
I don't believe
What do
you.
you believe
I
in?
think you're going to run for your life.
Oh, shut up. Talk shit.
And that's an interesting moment there. Firstly, he's been flattened by a light middleweight. I'll address that in a second. But Conor said he's going to go out there and flatten him, and Chris said, "No, I think you're going to run for your life." And that is alluding to the strategy and tactics that we can kind of try and predict will be on display here. And it's an interesting one. I think Eubank Jr., he has the options in how he goes about this. He's the one that can decide, I'm going to use my extra size and reach and walk this guy down and I'm going to beat him up. Or he can be the one that says, I'm going to box on the back foot and use my jab. I think either way, he's got to use his jab without question. And I think he's at his best when he uses his jab. Remember the DeGale fight, he finally got his jab going properly in a fight and was quite impressive. And I know he's had rumored elbow issues for a long time, so always threw a lot more bent arm shots. But I really think if he can use his jab on this fight, he could make it potentially quite an easy night's work. But it will be really interesting to see, and I will do a tactical analysis before this one to try and figure out how I think both men will approach it, because there will be a lot of strategy and tactics at play. Now, with regards to that, you've been flattened by a light middleweight comment. I want to cast your minds back to something. I'm going to get Conor Benn's box rec up here, because I think it's easy to forget how perceptions of Conor Benn have changed in a very, very short amount of time. 23 wins, 14 knockouts. Looks pretty good, right? But I think we may have all forgotten. Let's go back to 2017, December the 13th, 2017. I want to cast your minds back, people, to a man called Cedric Peynaud. Cedric Peynaud got a points decision over Conor Benn in that fight. And it was one of those fights where I think most people felt that that Peynaud was potentially robbed. I need to go back and watch it to refresh my mind. But what I do remember is that Conor Benn got knocked down twice in the first round of that fight. Now, look, say what you want about the fact that Eubank Jr. was knocked out by Liam Smith and Conor Benn has never been stopped. But the fact is he was hurt to the point where he went down twice in a round against a guy who was fighting at 147 pounds. Also worth keeping in mind in this is that Peynaud had fought as low as 140. I think he'd even weighed in light of the 140 before, if I just check his... Yeah, he weighed 139 and a quarter for one of his earliest fights, so 140. Point is, he's not the biggest welterweight. So it's a really interesting one. I think it's fascinating that Ben is choosing to go and analyze the record of Eubank when Ben has been nowhere near the level of Eubank. His best win is probably an old Chris Algieri, where he looked good. Chris Van Heerden was a decent win as well. Again, a knockout. But since the allegations of since the failed test and the allegations that it was deliberate, he's not knocked anybody out. And up at 154, he's won UDs, but he's not won well. He hasn't looked impressive. Eubank Jr. has had a career on a whole different level from Conor Benn. You know, people, for those of you that are watching that don't necessarily, maybe, because I know this is going to attract a casual audience, people that don't necessarily watch boxing, don't understand the history. Chris Eubank Jr. has boxed at a far, far higher level than Conor Benn. I mean, and he hasn't won all of them, but the reality is he's been in the ring with guys. Let's even go back to when he was at British level. He won the British title against Nick Blackwell. He defended it against Tom Doran, whatever. And then he vacated it. But the fact is he's been a British champion. Conor Benn's never won a British title. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is, guys like, he lost to Billy Joe Saunders early in his career on a split decision. I remember that fight, and it was sort of I had it as sort of a 6-6 fight. You probably edge it for Billy Joe Saunders, but that was very early on, and Billy Joe Saunders was an incredible talent. But he's had wins against Gary Spike O'Sullivan, who's he was a decent operator. He was okay. Nick Blackwell was a talented boy, and Eubank Jr. put a beating on him. And then he had the win against Arthur Abraham, and it was an old Arthur Abraham. Avni Yildirim, who's just not a great fighter, lost to George Groves, which, George Groves was an absolutely elite super middleweight, and Eubank Jr. is fighting up a weight there. He beats an old James DeGale, has that win against Matt Korobov, which was, I believe, a retirement, left shoulder injury. Win against an old Liam Williams, lost against Liam Smith, beat Liam Smith. So there's a lot of asterisks in Eubank's career, but make no mistake, people. Losing to Liam Smith is not losing to Conor Benn. Liam Smith is a legit guy. Very, very, very good 154-pounder. And there's absolutely nothing you can tell me to convince me that Conor Benn is better than Liam Smith. If he has the career that Liam Smith had, he'll have had a very good career. So I'm not having that. Eubank messed up that first fight. There's a lot of question marks over what Eubank's got left, but for Conor Benn to sit there and put these questions on Eubank, it's really interesting that Eubank's not bothering to sort of inspect Conor Benn's record, because, look, Conor Benn, he's had difficulties in his career, and whilst he was looking a lot better, he didn't look great when he moved up from 47. So it's very, very interesting. Anyway, let's continue.
I mean, at the first press conference, he pulled the stump with the egg and he smashed it around his face. Some people laughed. Others thought it was all good, part of the sporting thing. Other people felt it was quite a demeaning moment to reduce it to whacking your opponent with an egg. I mean,
a demeaning moment. Like, what do you think this is? This is the fight game. I just do not take this egg thing as seriously as some people do. I thought it was quite funny. I went to school where people got egged all the time. Stuff like that happened all the time. I do not think getting hit around the head with an egg is particularly big deal. I thought the fine on Eubank Jr., I was going to make a video, but I didn't have time in the end. I thought the 100k fine on Eubank Jr. was an absolute joke. The stuff Chisora's pulled over the years. I mean, and Ben himself saying he wasn't fined for his failed test. I mean, come on. It's just ridiculous. So I don't take the egg thing particularly seriously. It's hyped the fight up. He's made everybody more money. The fine was a joke. Let's continue.
On reflection, are you pleased you did that, or do you think that it was a bit childish?
On reflection, I wish I had an egg in both hands. That's the truth of it. The egg.
You want to get the second one off? Hold it absolutely on.
The egg was it was a symbol.
Oh, sure.
It was a statement.
What was the statement?
That if you cheat, you will be punished. You will be embarrassed. You will be exposed.
Cleared.
Okay.
3 times.
Cleared by people I don't know and don't care about.
You're the one who's an idiot.
Conor, how does it make you feel when he repeatedly calls you a cheat?
That's his job. Because if I was him, I'd probably do the same.
That's good awareness from Conor Benn there, to know that it is Eubank's job and Eubank is harnessing it and using it as a tool. So Ben knows what's going on here, to be fair to him. But he also bites. And I do think it makes him uncomfortable. So it's an interesting one. But at least he's got that good perspective. And I don't think Conor Benn's been too badly affected by anything, to be clear. I think Eubank is smart and I like what he's doing. But I also think that Conor Benn's, he's kind of okay. But the whole egg thing, I think Piers is just massively... I think he wants there to be some kind of cordial, respectful thing. This is the fight game, man. As long as no one's pulled a knife out or done anything crazy, I don't have a massive issue with it. It's just an egg. It's such an overreaction, in my opinion. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Maybe some of you don't agree with me.
Just April 26th.
The angriest I've seen you, actually, was when your dad intervened with the egg throwing and put his arm, I think, on your throat. And at the second press conference, you basically threatened Nigel Benn. Said if he did that again, you'd deal with him. And
it wasn't a threat, it was a promise.
Oh, it's not a promise, is it?
You can't touch
scumbag.
You can't
touch me.
So you can throw an egg in his face and his father can't...
No, me and him are fighting.
You're just upset.
Me and you are
dad
fighting.
Can't stand you and my dad has my back. You are, that's all that
I'm not
was.
upset.
My dad put
me
his
and you are
arms
fighting.
around you
Whatever happens between us
My dad would put his arms around you again. What are you going to do about it?
No one else.
What are you going to do about it? Tell me.
No one else can touch me.
Tell me.
If they do, there'll be consequences.
Oh, consequences to what?
If anyone else
slap you right now,
if anyone else touches me,
what if I was to slap you right now? What are you going to do about it?
No.
Yeah, go on, go ahead.
Yeah, talk about my dad.
I'm not talking about your dad.
No.
But I told him.
But
I told him.
Get off me, please.
My old man would never touch you, so your old man's never going to touch me.
I'll never slap you.
You would never slap me.
Yeah, no, I won't
You
slap
put your hands on me twice since my last fight.
When?
You pushed me.
A little push.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You put your hands on me.
Little push and stuff.
You
Stop moaning
put your
about it.
hands on me.
Stop moaning about it. Little push and shove. Stop moaning about it. Talk about my dad.
You put your hands on me, I put my hands on you.
I'll
Now
never
we're even.
disrespect your dad.
Yes, you would. You disrespected him before.
What? The fact that he don't like you? It's a matter of fact.
Okay, well,
it's
it's
a matter of fact. How's that
You
disrespect?
can't give it and not take it.
You fucked up by talking about my dad. You done fucked up
You
talking
fucked up
about my
touching
dad.
me, and you fucked up by taking this fight.
Yeah.
That's right.
Let's react to that quickly. So, I mean, I sort of said, oh no, during that. It was because it was a bit embarrassing for Conor Benn, in my opinion. He made those big movements, those reflex movements, like he was going to go for Eubank, and Eubank did not even flinch. And he didn't move an iota. He was not bothered by it. So again, Eubank holding his ground, not letting Conor Benn feel like he's got in his head at all, that he has any fear for the man. At the start of the video, I said this was actually maybe the most irritated I'd seen Eubank Jr. in this interview. And I think it wasn't irritation. I don't remember what I said exactly, but irritation is not the right word. That was the most fiery and engaged I've seen him. And he even swore there. I know his dad talks about, like, you know, they shouldn't swear and blah, blah, blah. And I could see in Eubank, I just felt in him a little bit there, like he's matching Conor Benn and he was being drawn into the firefight a little bit and he matched his language and he swore back at him. So that made me think, oh, he has riled Eubank up a little bit here. And this whole thing around his dad, Nigel putting his hands on Chris, getting him by the throat. Conor, anytime, Chris starts to say anything about the fact that he would deal with Nigel Benn if he touches him ever again, it shows that that's another trigger point for Conor, And it was a little bit embarrassing that felt like, again, it feels kind of manufactured. It's a good moment for the cameras. But I mean, is Ben actually irritated? Here's the question. And you get in the comment section, let me know. Do you think that Conor Benn is actually angry, or do you think he's sort of doing it for a show when Eubank Jr. says these things? Because, in reality, Eubank didn't do anything. He said a thing. It'd be so much easier just to go, yeah, whatever. We're going to get in the ring and settle it. But instead, he gets very fired up. And I can't tell if it's to sell the show or if Conor Benn's actually frustrated. But Eubank calm enough, and I would say that's the most animated I've seen him when they stand up there. And I quite enjoyed when he said, "You effed up by taking this fight." So anyway, let's continue.
What the fuck you looking at?
You.
Well, come, we can have it outside, no problem. We can have it outside, no problem.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we can.
And that what the F are you looking at bit there? In the social media clip that I saw initially, they'd made it look like he'd said that to Piers Morgan, which was quite hilarious. They cut it at that exact moment. So now I know he was saying it to Eubank Jr. So I thought maybe he was saying it to one of the security. He's saying it to Eubank Jr. Now he's saying, oh, we can go outside. We can deal with this outside. Empty threats, absolute nonsense. They're both going to get in the ring and get paid very well to do it. And you won't see any of that. There's no chance. It's just empty threats. And Eubank, again, completely unfazed, unrattled.
If anyone put their hands on my son, I promise you they won't.
Nigel couldn't defend his son when he wasn't sure what you were using to attack him.
Listen, he can do whatever he wants, but I had to issue the warning to let him know that it can't happen again.
And what would you do if he did that again?
I said he wouldn't get his hand back if he
what meaning what?
What does that mean?
It means what it means.
Well, tell me what that means.
I said it.
He wouldn't get his hand back. What are you going to do? Cut it off?
He wouldn't get the hand back.
What does that mean?
I don't need to say anything more.
Chris, come on. You've got to explain what that means.
I don't have to do anything.
He's being clever again.
You tell a man he's not going to have his hand back. Why?
I made the statement, and that's it.
That bit there is where I sort of referred to this earlier. That bit is where Piers Morgan loses me a little bit. He's not being impartial. He's pressing Eubank on what was a comment that was made to make Eubank sort of seem tough and to basically put his foot down and be alpha and be like, look, you don't touch me, no one touches me, and you will lose your hand if you do it again. It's that classic sort of tough guy, statement. Obviously, he's not going to lose his hand, but he might attack him or something like that. And so to press him on that individual comment, individual statement, Piers almost looks a bit irritated by him when he's pressing him there. And I wonder if, I don't know why Piers is so taken by Eubank saying that when Conor Benn just stood up and tried to go for Eubank just there, like actually try and go for him. So it's weird, it's contradictory. I think he is in the Conor Benn camp, and I think he's in the Nigel Benn camp. And Chris is refusing to engage him. He says it means what it means. I said what I said. And he's refusing to go further than that, because to try and explain a comment like that, you're going to start looking a bit silly, because it doesn't really mean anything. And it doesn't really, how do I put this? The practicality of someone not getting their hand back is obviously playground jibes and nonsense. So the fact that Piers is focused on that, he's tried to find some kind of thing that Eubank did wrong and try and pull him up on it. So it's just stupid. And everyone knows what Eubank meant by that. He meant I will retaliate, basically. And that is that.
I'm a 3-time IBO world champion, super middleweight and middleweight.
Oh dear.
And outside,
you can see Conor Benn's laughing too.
No, they were full world title belts.
Do you feel that they were as valid as?
Absolutely.
Just
Regardless of what other people say,
yeah.
regardless of, how they view those titles, to me, I was a world champion. I am a world champion.
Do you believe that, Conor?
No, not at all.
It doesn't matter what he
He's asking me my opinion. My opinion is, I got offered to fight for the IBO world title against Sebastian Formella, who I beat convincingly. But I chose not to fight for the IBO world title so I don't lose my ranking in the legitimate other organisations, which is why I'm top 5 in the WBA, WBC, IBF and WBO, because I chose not to fight for the IBO world title just to say I'm IBO world champion. And the reality is he fought for the IBO in a leisure centre in front of 2,000 people.
I fought for the IBO at the O2 in front of 20,000
people. Who was it, Quinlan? Who was it? Renaud Quinlan?
James DeGale.
No, Renaud Quinlan, was it?
I'm 2-time.
Was it Renaud Quinlan?
2-time.
Was it Renaud Quinlan?
One was against
13
James
and
DeGale.
2 from Australia.
Have you ever fought in front of 20,000 people headline?
Actually, not headline, but I have.
No, you haven't.
But again,
Exactly.
what you've done is summed up your whole career. That's your greatest accomplishments. I'm still 28, I've got time. You ain't. You're an old
long,
AP.
kid. Not for long.
You're an old age pensioner, mate.
You think you've got time. You've
of
actually
course
got
I've
2
got time.
months, and then it's game over for you.
Again, talking rubbish.
Okay, a couple things to go through there, and that was quite an interesting exchange. Firstly, Eubank defending those IBO belts he won. Let's be absolutely clear here. The IBO is a load of crap. I have absolutely no interest or time for the IBO belts. Eubank has never been a middleweight champion. He's never been a super middleweight champion. He's had some decent wins, but he's not been a legitimate world champion. Conor Benn is correct in what he says there. But Eubank, again, he comes back with a decent retort where he says, you've not fought as a headliner in front of 20,000 people, trying to find, again, it's all about increasing that pressure. You don't know what it feels like to be the bad guy. You don't know what it feels like to be a drug cheat. You don't know what it feels like to headline for any kind of significant title with all this pressure on you. And it's just, again, and he refers to him as kid there as well. And he did that earlier. I skipped over it because there's too much here to go through. But there's a moment at the end of the heated exchange where he says, I can go outside, and Chris says, anytime, kid. And again, I'm more experienced than you. You are a dumb kid and you are not ready for this, is basically what he's inferring. But just to reiterate, IBO is a load of crap. I have no interest in the IBO, and Eubank hasn't been a 160 champion. And I would absolutely love nothing more than for Eubank to go and win a title at 160. That's what I've always wanted. I've always said this. I wanted to do that over this fight. It's disappointing to me that he's never gone and fought for a proper 160 belt, because I just won't look back on his career with the level of acclaim it probably should have, because he is talented. Maybe not the most, but he's talented enough to win a belt at 160. That's for sure. So that's disappointing. Also, before I continue, I should say that Conor Benn made comments somewhere in there about dropping back down to 147. I said this before and I'll say it again. To go and have one fight at 160 and then go back to 147, he's got to be very careful. We saw what happened to Kell Brook with Golovkin, then going, breaking his eye socket, then going into the Errol Spence fight, finding it hard to take the weight off, depleting himself, breaking another eye socket. We saw it with Roy Jones when he went up to heavyweight, then went back down to fight Tarver. Losing that fight, and you could have said Tarver had his number, but at the end of the day, I think that rapid weight loss was a massive factor. We've seen it time and time again in history. He needs to be extremely careful with what he's doing here. And the reality is, he's as bad as Eubank. He says, Eubank, you've got no ambition, you're fighting at 147. You're fighting a 160 for money. Mate, it's the same bloody thing. It's harder for you because you're coming up in weight, but also you're younger, you're fresher. That's the reason why there's any intrigue in this. And you should be fighting for titles at 147. It's no different. You're not exempt from that. So let's continue.
You can't even shake each other's hand.
I could shake.
I know you've offered to, but you won't do that.
What would it achieve?
Just
apart from giving you views.
It doesn't give me any views.
So why are you asking us to do it? I've told you I don't want to do it.
I think that actually it is a noble sport, and that although you're going to be getting in a ring and pounding each other's heads in, actually you can also at the same time have a mutual respect for the fact you're both professional boxers and you both know what that entails.
He has no class. He just slapped me around the head with an egg. You think he's going to shake my hand? He has zero class.
I've shaken the hands of pretty much every man I've ever fought. But if you cheat, that respect, it goes out the window. I'm sorry.
Your opinion.
I have to make an example. There are kids that are going to watch this. They need to understand, if you get caught,
cleared,
you lose everything. You lose your respect, you lose your name, you lose your life. In my eyes, if someone was to have pinned him down and jabbed a syringe into the side of his ass and squeezed it in, if that had happened and I saw it, guess what? He's still a cheat. He shouldn't have let it happen. It's his responsibility to protect himself at all times. He didn't do that, he's a cheat. End of story.
Just shake his hand.
Don't ask me again.
That final moment there confirms to me that Piers Morgan was always Team Ben in this interview. And the fact that Eubank has said, I'm making an example of him. I've shaken hands with all, shaken or shaken, whatever you want to say, hands with all my opponents. I'm not shaking his hand because he's a cheat and I'm going to make an example of him. And Piers Morgan is utterly obsessed with the idea of them shaking hands and having respect and all this stuff. Piers, mate, you know, it's ridiculous to say that Eubank has a responsibility to shake Conor Benn's hand when, and rightly so, Conor Benn failed the test and Eubank resents him for it. And to what extent he resents him for it, we don't truly know, but he's well within his rights. And look, he's taken the fight, and that point is made during this interview. If you want to go and watch the whole thing, I would encourage you to do so. There's lots of bits that I had to skip over in favor of others because this is a long video. But he sort of said, look, I need to make an example of him. I need to rid him from boxing. And at the end of the day, Eubank's doing it for money. He should just say, look, it's for money. I'm doing it for money. But at the end of the day, the guy's still a cheat. So, you know, it is what it is. He also says that Conor Benn will fight either way, which is true. So fair enough. All good points. And I think that... yeah, Piers Morgan's obsession over that handshake at the end there, that's a bit of his own personal opinion that he's interjecting into the interview. And I quite like the fact that Eubank didn't shake his hand. I like the fact that Eubank made that final statement and said, and it's that strict liability thing again. I don't even care if he was pinned down and this thing was injected into him. It's protect yourself at all times. He shouldn't have let that happen. So, fascinating stuff, fascinating interview, fascinating face-off. I thought that this was really, really good. I've got to be honest. I thought that even though I felt Piers Morgan was biased, I felt that he pushed Eubank to make some really great statements because of the fact he pushed him a little bit harder. I thought he was really lenient with Conor Benn. Conor Benn just refusing to talk about the test. I thought Piers could have pushed him a lot harder than that, rather than his obsession with pushing Eubank on not respecting Conor, not respecting the fact he's been cleared his right to be in the ring, and the fact he wouldn't shake his hand. I thought all that was and also the threat he made to Nigel Benn. I think it was very pro Nigel and Conor Benn, this interview, and I think that shows the relationship that Piers Morgan has with them. But that's that, guys. I want you to get in the comment section below, and please let me know what you made of this. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. Do you agree with my comments about Piers Morgan and being a bit biased in this interview? Do you agree with my comments in general about the dynamic between Eubank Jr. and Benn? And who do you think is going to win this damn fight? Because there is some intrigue for me around it. I can't lie, because there's always there's question marks over both guys, really. There's question marks over Conor Benn at 160. There's question marks over Eubank Jr. with the rehydration clause. And where he's at 35 years old, his level of ambition, all that good stuff. But guys, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Please bang a like on the video. Please subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Get those comments in. And as I always say, on to the next one.